Hey guys, this is Dave with Gazaudio. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Topping PA5 II Plus Class D speaker amplifier. And as you can see, it's quite small, so it's a great solution for use in a desktop scenario and maybe with some near-field desktop speakers. But don't be fooled by its diminutive stature because this little thing hits hard. So a couple of years ago, Topping released the PA5, and it garnered quite a bit of praise in the audio community, not just because of the amount of power it can put out, but also because of the quality of its sound. But it's not perfect, and a couple of the issues are that it only has two sets of TRS balanced inputs, so no RCA inputs, and it also does not come with a remote. Aside from that, it's a total beast. So now Topping has introduced two new iterations of the PA5, the PA5 II, which is priced at $249, and the PA52 Plus, which is the one I'll be reviewing today, and it's priced at $329. So we'll go over what's included in the box, go over the specifications, and also touch on the updates from the original and the differences between the PA5 II and the PA5 II Plus. Then we'll jump into the sound. As for what's included in the box, we have the PA5 II Plus, of course. It also comes with a power cable and a very large power adapter. As for the build, it has a fairly small form factor. It has a metal chassis combined with a glass faceplate, and there are ventilation holes on either side of the chassis for cooling. It's the exact same size as the E50 DAC and L50 amplifier, so it's intended primarily as a desktop solution, which is likely one of the reasons they did not include a remote, because if it's used in that scenario, most likely you'll be able to reach it, and if you pair it with an E50, then you can just set the level on the PA5 II and use the remote that comes with the E50 or whatever DAC you happen to pair it with to control the volume. So in my case, the DACs I tested the PA5 II Plus with are the Gustard R26, the Matrix Mini i4, Topping E70, E70 Velvet, all of which have their own remotes. On the front of the PA5 II Plus, we have two switches. The first switch is the power switch that has three positions: on, off, and trigger. The second switch lets you select whether you want to use the TRS balanced inputs or the RCA single-ended inputs. And then there is a volume knob. On the back, we have a pair of TRS balanced inputs, a pair of RCA single-ended inputs, a 12-volt trigger input, left and right speaker outputs, then a 2-pin screw-on power input. And that's basically it. So it's a very simple device. Now, something I should point out is that one of the changes they made are the addition of the RCA inputs. Again, the original PA5 only gave you TRS balanced inputs. And that decision on the original PA5 may have alienated some buyers, but that's not the case with the PA5 II and PA5 II Plus, because now you can pair either of those with anything basically that has RCA output. So that's pretty awesome. As far as power output, the PA5 II Plus is a Class D amplifier, and it gives you 125 watts times 2 at 4 ohms and then 65 watts times 2 at 8 ohms. And that's the same as the original PA5. However, the PA5 II, not the Plus, does decrease the power output to 100 watts times 2 at 4 ohms and 65 watts at 8 ohms. And I would pay closer attention to the 65 watts though. The speakers I tested it with are both 8 ohms, so that's what my listening impressions will be based on. Okay, let's move on to the sound. let's talk about the sound of the PA52 Plus. So as I mentioned, my listening impressions will be based on an 8-ohm load because both the LS50 Meta and R300 are 8-ohm speakers. And while I did pair it with several DACs, most of my listening was done with the PA5 II Plus paired with the Matrix Mini i4 and the topping E70 using XLR to TRS cable. So the first time I hooked this up, I have to say I did not have my expectations set very high. And I should also tell you that up to this point, I had never heard the original PA5, so I had no idea what to expect, other than some reading I had done on the specs off of the website. And it just so happened I made a short video of my initial reaction, so before we move on, I'm going to share that with you because I think it says a lot about how surprised I was by the sound of this little device. So I just got the PA5 II Plus hooked up about an hour ago, and I'm running through some test tracks. Right now I'm using my Matrix Mini i4 as the source, using the XLR outs into the TRS balanced inputs on the PA5 II Plus. Of course, I have a lot more testing I have to do. I want to try some other DACs out, but what I'm hearing so far has kind of got me blown away, to be honest with you. And right now, my main integrated amplifier is the Cambridge CXA61. That runs about 60 watts times 2 at 8 ohms. I'm having a really difficult time distinguishing the differences between the two. And that's, when I purchased that, I got it for around $800. I think when it was new, it was around $1,000 brand new at the time of its release. So it's a really, really good integrated amplifier for this level of system. It's not, of course, it's not like super high end, but it works great with these speakers and all the speakers that I currently have. To be honest, I'm hearing, again, very little difference. The CXA61 is giving me a little more forward depth, maybe a little more detail and slightly better imaging. But I have to say, I'm really surprised at how close the PA5 II Plus is coming as far as just overall sound performance. Of course, again, we are talking about $329. And like I said, I still have a lot more test tracks I have to run through. Again, pair it with some other DACs. But up to this point, I have to say I'm pretty impressed. So obviously, as you could see, I was not expecting the PA5 II Plus to sound that good. And the fact that it almost rivals the sound of my CXA61 is pretty impressive. And it definitely had me feeling some mixed emotions. Excited because I always love to see any device perform way above its price point, and disappointed because I spent more than double what the PA5 II Plus cost on my primary home amplifier. Now, of course, PA5 II Plus could never replace my CXA61 because it doesn't have nearly the amount of features, and as impressive as the sound is on the PA5 II Plus, I do still think the CXA61 handles transients a little better and also presents a little more of a focused image. That being said, the sound of the PA5 II Plus hits way above its weight in nearly every category. It's fairly linear, instruments and vocals sound very natural, but there were a few things that really immediately caught my attention when I first sat down to listen. The first thing was its ability to retrieve detail in both the treble and the mid-range, and the track that I noticed it on was Lady Be Good off of the album Jazz at the Pawn Shop. Because the way the cymbals were recorded and mixed, it's pretty incredible, and the PA5 II Plus was able to retrieve so much of that cymbal detail, and even when the drummer was playing with the brushes, the brush detail on the snare. But the mid-range detail was also very impressive as well, because as the song progresses, it's kind of broken up into a few different sections, and each instrument gets its own little solo and its own little time to shine. But the instrument that really stood out to me was the sax, because the PA5 II Plus was able to render a very impressive amount of the saxophone detail and that texture. And the second was its soundstage and imaging. And a couple of albums I refer to frequently are Polarity by the Hoff Ensemble and Macy Gray's Stripped, because both of those recordings have a very expansive presentation. And the PA5 II Plus not only reproduced the width, but also some of that forward depth as well. But beyond that, it also gave me really good imaging and instrument separation. So just to summarize my thoughts on the PA5 II Plus, I think this is one of my favorite types of reviews because it's not very often that you come across a device that over delivers on this scale. Now, bearing in mind, we are still talking about the $300 price range, but the level of detail, staging, and naturalness that the PA5 II Plus delivers is, again, getting uncomfortably close to the levels of my precious CXA61 and lots of other amps I've owned in the $800 to $1,000 price range. Now, as to whether or not it gets my recommendation, if all you need is a good, clean amplifier, and if you're okay with a device this simple and you don't need much in terms of additional features like digital inputs or Bluetooth, etc., then absolutely. But if you do need those features, then you're going to have to spend some serious money if you want this level of performance plus all of the features too. So the Topping PA5 II Plus is a very solid little device that is easily worth its cost in terms of pure sound performance. And again, this little thing really caught me off guard and surprised me in a very good way. So again, if you don't need a lot of features and you just need good, clean power, then I definitely recommend the PA5 II Plus. So that concludes my review of the Topping PA5 II Plus. If you're new to the Giz Audio channel and you like our videos, please take a minute and hit that subscribe button. And if you want to go a step further, you can also support us through our Patreon. I'll be sure and leave a link in the description. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch this review. Please like this video. Please share this video. I hope you have an awesome day.